Okay, let's talk about the Great American Songbook, what we call jazz standards, and what it means to learn a tune and know a tune. As many of you know, I just finished teaching my first semester at a college here in Montreal, and we are embarking on summer break and then preparing for the year ahead. It'll be my first full year teaching at this college. Maybe you are a young musician, a student going into college. Maybe you're someone who just graduated and you're getting out into the scene in your town. The Great American Songbook, or what we call jazz standards, the way I see their role is twofold. One is I find that language, those tunes, are a really brilliant portal into popular tonal harmony. So if you're a songwriter, an arranger, a composer, I think it's really important, no matter what style you work on. I think it's very important to have a grasp of that type of harmonic language. Even though contemporary pop music doesn't sound like that, sometimes it can. And if you're working in maybe more harmonically, let's say, adventurous or sophisticated music, like gospel, contemporary gospel, R&B, soul, musical theater, it's really important to have a grasp on the way the great songwriters of the 20s, 30s, and 40s navigated tonal harmony. Even if you don't plan on becoming a jazz musician and becoming someone that calls the repertoire, I think it's a really fundamental piece of musical knowledge to know. Now, if you are going to be a quote unquote jazz musician, and that is something you aspire towards, that's something you want to do, and specifically if you want to be a straight ahead or common practice jazz musician and you are going out to jam sessions, the role of the standard repertoire is to be a basis for you to make music with other people very, very quickly. And when I came up in the, mostly analog era, right? I came up with paper reel books before they got converted to PDF. I came up with CDs and cassettes, which CDs are digital, but you know what I mean. I came up with physical media. And I'm noticing more and more this very heavy reliance on iReal Pro. And I've talked about how I feel about iReal Pro. Spoiler alert, I don't really like it. When I came up, it was really frowned upon to bring a paper reel book to a jam session. The point of the jam session was it was a motivator for you to learn tunes and to know tunes, like not have to look at a chord sheet, not have to look at a lead sheet, not have to look at sheet music. You had to know the tune. That was the expectation of going to a jam session in the 90s and early 2000s, is if you call a tune, you should know it. You should know it without having to read it. That's the expectation that I still hold. And maybe that's a generational thing, and maybe that's kind of going out of style. But that's the expectation that I hold when I go out to a jam session, when I listen to young players at jam sessions. You know, this is a tradition. This is a language, and the point of learning standards, specifically in terms of their context at a jam session, is it's common language. If you go anywhere in the world and you call a really common standard, it is a gateway to making music above and beyond the language barrier. It is a gateway to connecting with your fellow musicians and your fellow human beings. And if your head is stuck in a lead sheet or stuck in your app, you're basically negating the connection that arises out of learning this language, out of learning this repertoire. The whole reason I post to YouTube, the whole reason I post on Instagram, the whole reason I do what I do is because I came up through jam sessions. I learned so much at jam sessions when I was young, when I was a teenager. We have to always remember that Black American music is an oral tradition, oral AU and oral O tradition. It's passed down from musicians to musicians. It's passed down through the records. It's passed down in the social context of hanging out at shows and at clubs and at jam sessions. That's how, above and beyond any book that I had, that's how I learned, was being around other musicians and hearing them play tunes and making notes of like, oh, that tune is common here. I should learn that the next time I come to this jam session. I firmly believe that the biggest factor in developing audiences and developing musicians is just sheer exposure. Like, if you look at cultures and countries where music is still consumed socially, I spend a lot of time in Brazil, so Brazil is the example that comes to mind for me. Like, you go out on a Saturday night and samba is everywhere and people are listening to it in person together in a crowd. It is a very social and communal experience. And the connection that even non-professional musicians have to folk musics in Brazil, it's very profound because it's social. Like, people go out and dance forró, people go out and dance samba. If you went to a samba jam session, or what's called in Portuguese a roda de samba, nobody's reading. Maybe the singer has a book of lyrics, but like, nobody's reading. Everybody knows those tunes, like, on a visceral, physical, social, human level. Everybody knows those tunes. And there's no shade about just showing up to the roda to enjoy it as a listener. But if you are going to participate, you have to know the repertoire. That's kind of how it goes. I remember one time I got invited into a roda, and obviously piano is not common in a roda de samba, but I went to a bar, there was a piano, and they were set up. The roda, the table and the musicians were set up in front of the piano, so the piano became part of the roda de samba. And someone called a fairly traditional samba called Se La Mangueira, which is not, I don't think it's known that much outside of Brazil. In my experience, I haven't heard it played very much here in Montreal, for example, but I knew it from a record that I love, Zimbo Trio and Elisete Cardoso. And so when the singer called this tune, she was surprised that a foreigner, knew this song, and I basically knew it. And the parts that I was shaky on, or that I was, maybe less familiar with, I just used my ears and I just followed along. I didn't have my head in a book. I didn't have my head in my phone. I was actively listening to what was going on and actively participating in the roda. And to me, that's what sharing music and playing music is about. It is about that sharing and that connection that happens when people have a common basis of repertoire. That's what it's about. It's not about downloading PDFs, and it's not about opening your app. It's about listening to what's going on around you and participating in the moment. And again, I don't want to feel like a gatekeeper, but there are certain tunes, certain jam session staples that if you have to look at your phone for an incredibly common tune, my first impression, let's say, is that you still have work to do. And like I said, there is no shade in going and attending a jam session and just being an observer and figuring out, okay, this is the repertoire that gets called. This is the level of musicianship that happens at this jam. This is the work I need to do in order to participate next time. Like, I have gone to sessions in New York and in Brazil, and I just listen because maybe they're calling repertoire that I don't know. Maybe the level of musicianship is kind of out of my league. Whatever it is, I have no problem just being an observer and a listener. So over the summer, I would encourage you all, if you are going into college or university, if you just finished college or university and you're entering into the, I was about to say the real world, but if you're entering into the scene, you know, it's festival season. There's going to be a lot of jam sessions this summer. Maybe try to keep the phone and the iPad off the music stands when you go to the jam. Just treat that as a challenge this year. Okay? Call tunes that you know in your core. You'll play them better. If you're not depending on reading something, you will play better. You will be more connected to the music, to not only the tune, but also to the way your fellow musicians are playing the tune around you in real time, because you can keep your eyes open and your ears open and you won't be focused on a page or a screen in front of you. So take that as a challenge for the summer, my friends. No screens at the jam session. All right, thank you so much for watching. My name is David Rishpan. If you haven't done so, please click like and subscribe and all the little buttons below the video. I'll see you in the next one.